Hello, Empowered Warriors. Welcome to episode 21. Oh my goodness. I just finished recording episode 21. It is midnight and I am just feeling so lit up as a result of recording this. I just received the guidance to just sit down and do the podcast episode. I had an idea of what I was going to talk about, and what came out of my mouth, I am still unraveling myself mentally. You are in for a treat. I invite you to listen to the whole thing. I invite you to listen to it. Obviously, listen to it at a time that's convenient for you, but I really encourage you to listen to this episode in a time where you can really just sit and absorb the information and have your journal ready. Because I think I actually need to go back and listen to this. It is really powerful stuff. It's probably my most favorite episode to date. It started out with the idea of it being around perfectionism, but then I went into all different kinds of subjects about how we don't show up for ourselves and how it shows up. So perfectionism, lack of self-worth, lack of alignment, not trusting ourselves, etc., etc. So I hope that you really pay attention during this episode. If you have a business, if you are a human being and you breathe the air every day, you are going to love this. If you are somebody who just wants a better life, you will get something out of this. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. I'm feeling really obviously fired up by this. So if you know somebody that doesn't have a business but is kind of struggling a little bit, please forward it to them. They will benefit. And I'm so excited to share this with you. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Empowered Warrior podcast. My name is Angela Noel, and I am an intuitive coach, acupuncturist, and Chinese herbalist. This podcast is all about empowerment, meaning how you can maintain your personal power in order to have the best life beyond your imagination. An empowered warrior is someone who has the identity of a person who is healthy, radiant, and free from all suffering, and has the tools ready and available to move through life's obstacles with confidence, ease, and a sense of freedom. In this podcast, I bring over 16 years experience in Chinese medicine, countless years of self-development, and a passion for helping others find their personal power. I will be discussing just a few of my favorite topics regarding health from a Chinese medicine perspective, brain habits, and spirituality, so that you can quickly pave your pathway to freedom and be free from the chains that have kept you stuck. My intention with this podcast is to serve as a guide for warriors who want to form a healthy foundation of body, mind, and spirit, and sustain it by changing who they are being from the inside and having a stronger connection to their higher selves. My goal is to help students end the unnecessary suffering that they place on themselves by having poor health habits, negative thought loops, and a lack of self-worth. I am so happy that you're here. Hello, warriors. How are you doing? I have to say that it's quite late at night. I'm sitting in my office and I have been guided to jump on here and talk to you. I was doing work for some other things in the business and I kept looking at my microphone and it was calling to me. Now, I don't necessarily need to have this done tonight, although it does help to get it done tonight as opposed to waiting. But there is something clearly that's coming through me. I don't necessarily have a plan. I have an idea, but I don't have a plan of what I'm going to say to you. And what I'm starting to realize is that these late night chats where I can just belly up to the microphone and my house is quiet. I don't hear the traffic. I live on a busy road in a Boston suburb, and I don't hear the traffic. My windows are closed now because it's getting chillier, so I don't hear not that I mind, but you may recall hearing some of the cicadas in the background for some of my podcasts that I recorded in the summer. It's just really peaceful. So what's coming through me, though, at this particular moment is the idea of perfectionism. I grew up a perfectionist, and it's something that I have been working on probably since I learned that I was a perfectionist. And I can recall, I know exactly when I learned that I was a perfectionist. I didn't necessarily want to believe it at the time, but I remember exactly where I was, and I was going to college. I was at my very first college, Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, near where I grew up. And I was a freshman, and I was struggling a little bit with school. I was actually struggling a lot with school. And I had gone through a school. I grew up in an area. It was in a New York City suburb about, an hour and 15 minutes north of New York City in Dutchess County, New York. I went to a public school with a lot of kids, but I hung out with a lot of kids that were considered to be very, very intelligent, very smart, very driven, very left brain, very you got to achieve and accomplish and you got to do. A lot of my friends were high honors, AP, if you know what AP courses are, advanced placement. And they were just a lot of them were naturally smart kids. And then I think there were some that just worked for their grades. But that was something that really impressed upon me, is that being smart and achieving and doing is a value or a set of values that is rewarded. And for some reason, I don't know why, I had a lot of friends like that, but I wasn't necessarily that student. I was not a poor student. I was one of those students that, surprise, surprise, I did well by doing the minimum amount of work. And I remember many, many nights, just have to do a side note here, it's 11:11 p.m. right now. Magic numbers, so I'm meant to be doing this episode for you all. So I remember specifically having writing assignments. When the writing assignments really started to get a little more complicated, maybe in 7th, 8th grade, even in upper elementary school, I remember having a typewriter and staying up very late at night because it was a typewriter, right? It took forever to type anything. Because if you made a mistake, then you had to, get the erasing tape. Okay, now I'm really, not that I really care about age, but, for those of you that maybe you don't even know what a typewriter is or never even used one, I'm really showing my age here. So it was either the solution was white out, and then you would have to line up the typewriter again and type over it. Or I remember I used to help my dad out in his office. He had a business, and sometimes I would type and they had this correcting tape that you'd have to put in the typewriter and then hit the letter in the exact same spot. You'd have to line up the tape and then hit that letter in the exact same spot, and basically the pressure from the stamp or whatever that was called of the typewriter that was holding the letter would pull up that ink with this erasable tape. That was a little bit of a side story, was it not? But my point being is that I often remember many nights similar to this night where I was up late writing, and there was this flow to my writing. It just came out of me. It was natural. It felt good. It felt very easy to pump out a 5-page paper or whatever the assignment was. I got really good grades working that way, and I was able to pull that off until about 11th grade. And quite honestly, I don't even know why I'm telling you all this, you guys, but I'm sure it will all make sense later because I'm riffing at this point. I'm totally riffing, okay? So homework assignments, especially the writing assignments, I do identify as a writer, were easy until about 11th grade. And quite honestly, I think that there was a lot of hype around going into junior year of high school because that was the year, quote unquote, where colleges really looked at the students' grades and performance and what they did and their involvement, etc., etc., etc. There was so much weight put on into junior year. And there was a lot of pressure. And because I hung around so many type A driven, achieved kids, I picked up on that energy. And frankly, my brain, now this could be a story, but when I think about, what I just told you about how things just flowed when I allowed the flow to show up, it just showed up with effortless ease. Having this structure of suddenly worrying about grades and worrying about performance when I never had to do that before was really jarring. And that may have been the beginning of when the perfectionism, in my specific case, started to show up. Now, it was probably there even sooner because I can tell you with certainty that I always believed that doing and being in the action of doing and accomplishing, even if it wasn't necessarily related to school, was a positive thing, was a good thing. Being productive was a good thing. And there was a lot of guilt and shame around not doing anything. And it's not necessarily a matter of me, again, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody. I think it's just the interpretations I had. And it's something that stuck with me for many, many years, was this idea that doing is good and not doing is bad. And if you've been listening to me for a while, you probably already know that there isn't really any such thing as good and bad, not counting anything that's going to affect people in a negative way, right? Or people that are where their mission in life is to help other people. I'm talking about good and bad from the standpoint of your own inner compass when it comes to how you navigate through life and how you treat yourself and how you measure achievement and how you measure, most importantly, your self-worth. So for me, the messaging I received was, in order to have worth, in order to have importance, you had to be a doer. And I struggled with this concept because I'm a creative, I'm right-brained, I am more of an artist than an analytical left-brain person. And I know this now because I've gone through this. I'm, in my late 40s at this point. So I know my process and I know how my brain works. But at the time, between the school that I was in and the messaging I received, trying to keep up with this kind of system as a creative, as a as an artist, as a right-brained person, was very tough. And not playing victim story, but what this is about is how perfectionism shows up for so many of us. And what I'm doing is sharing my story and my experience of perfectionism and how it's shaped my life, in the hopes that it will help you, warrior, in some capacity navigate your perfectionism and be able to accept yourself in a way so that you can surrender and live the life that you want. So, going back to Marist College, I all of a sudden was in college. And I think I had stories. I had programming. I had beliefs around being in college. Now, whether it was harder or easier than high school, that's debatable. I do think that there was more responsibility, there was more reading, there were more assignments, there was definitely the need to be accountable, right? However, the work itself, I would say, was not exactly difficult. I was not a physics major or a math major. I was a liberal arts major, and I had a lot of classes that involved a lot of reading and a lot of writing. But I think that because of these stories of achievement and doing, and perhaps many, many years of the conflict, the inner conflict that I had with being this person that is more right brain, more creative, living in a world of doing, I was always in a state of fighting with myself. I should be doing this, but I really want to just do this. And instead of reading the damn book for school, I ended up in battle with myself quite often. And quite honestly, this is the first time I have been able to put words to this experience. So, warriors, I just want to express my gratitude for listening and hearing me out, because I know that by me sharing this story with you, this is going to help you navigate some part of you, whether it is your perfectionism or whether it's self-torture, the torture that we as humans put ourselves under, or low self-esteem, low self-confidence. I know that this is going to help some of you, and that's why I'm being led to talk about this. So, Marist College was, I actually, some of my best teachers, some of my best classes, some of my most memorable experiences of college was at Marist College. But I can say that about all the schools I've been to. I had a really amazing creative writing experience with a teacher named Milton Teichman. I will never forget him. I will never forget the way he taught me how to use punctuation, and I loved his class. And then my other favorite class at Marist was Philosophy 101 class, and some of the books that we read, and the teacher that I had, who was probably, I should say professor, Dr. Wiener. Dr. Scott Wiener was the teacher. And the teachings from that class, I just remember talk about being able to put something together at the last minute and get an A. It was in those classes. So maybe that's why I love them so much, is because I got A's. Just kidding. But I love those classes, legit. But as far as going to Marist, I only ended up going there for one semester because, to be perfectly honest, as an 18, 19-year-old kid, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And looking back, I think I was one of those people that probably didn't need to go to college right away. I'll just say right away, because I don't want to say at all, but I probably would have been one of those kids that would have been just as happy teaching English abroad, or learning more about entrepreneurship, or going to BOCES and learning more life skills. And I feel like, especially the last thing I just said about BOCES or learning a trade, all that stuff, unfortunately, was looked down upon. And it's really unfortunate, actually. And don't get me started on this is not meant for me to go on a soapbox, but sometimes I wonder about education. And if I were to say one amazing thing that is happening as a result of the pandemic, of the corona, is that parents are starting to realize what is the best solution. And this is just in my observation and interpretation. I don't have kids, but they're starting to realize what is the best solution for their kids when it comes to their education. And a lot of creative solutions are coming out of this as a result. So getting back to the perfectionism, I think it's really important to bring this up and start to talk candidly about issues like this, because here I am, I'm sitting, in my house 30 years later, still thinking about my perfectionism from when I was 18. And the reason why I brought up Marist College to begin with was because, like I mentioned earlier, I was struggling with school, and I ended up going to the school psychologist. And it was that psychologist that pointed it out right away. She said, "You're a perfectionist." And I was thinking, no, I'm not. I'm not a perfectionist. I don't do anything perfectly. I don't do anything well enough. She said, that's perfectionism. You do not take action. You wait till the last minute because you're afraid that it's not going to be good enough. And there was part of me that still didn't believe that. However, it always stuck with me, that awareness of the reason why I procrastinated and waited to the last minute, or didn't do my homework, because then I can always blame it on something like, I didn't give myself that much time to do it. I was busy or whatever. So fast forward, what I'm observing, and I'm right here with you, warriors. This perfectionism issue is something that I still work through every day. And my approach has changed tremendously around perfectionism because I don't have it in my identity anymore that I'm a perfectionist. And then when I start to notice the perfectionist tendencies showing up, I have ways to stop it dead in its tracks. Like it's not going to go anywhere. But because I work with entrepreneurs and I help entrepreneurs elevate themselves, balance the masculine and the feminine energies, manage their health so that they can have prosperity without damaging their health and their mental well-being, I see perfectionism show up way, way too often. And while it is a good idea, I think that it shows up for reasons. It's often from programming, things that we learned from our parents, from our teachers, whoever was shaping and molding us when we were children. I'm sure to some extent there's a purpose for it. However, when I think of and I consider my background with perfectionism and the lessons and the messaging, I should say, that I got about how one should be, and always feeling like I'm in a state of conflict with myself, I'm starting to wonder, and I wonder if you are too, how that affects you later as an entrepreneur, or a parent, or just a person, a human being existing, when you're always in a state of conflict with yourself. Because what I know now is that when something doesn't feel right, when I feel like I'm in conflict with myself, I know now that that is a sign that I am out of alignment. And alignment, warriors, is the most important connection that you can have with yourself in order to move forward in your life with a state of ease, knowing that you're making an impact, knowing that you are living your dharma. Am I making sense? Because I feel like I am literally all over the place. For those of you, I hear you and I feel you, that are in a state of inner conflict most of the time. Like, if you say 50% or more of the time, you're feeling in conflict. So what could signs of this be, right? Inner conflict, not being in alignment. So the difficulty to make decisions, like somebody who just can't make a decision to save their life. Now that can be a sign of a lot of things. That could be procrastination, which I think is a sign of fear, right? And other things. But the inability to just make a decision, the feeling that you are constantly battling with yourself, that harshness, right? That self-hatred, that self-loathing, the feeling that maybe there's something that you have on your calendar, right? And maybe you just, by complete accident, you forget that appointment. That is actually, if I set something up and I just forget about it, or I space out, I'm really, I think, fairly good with my calendar in general. I'm probably 95% with my calendar. I'm good. But there have been a couple of times where I have spaced out on somebody, like completely and totally spaced. And what I learned later is that person that I was supposed to meet with ended up having really negative energy or dark energy, or was somebody that I didn't align with, for example. Or perhaps this person's energy feels really frantic when I'm around them. I mean, there's certain people who I love dearly that I can no longer be around because of their energy. So this could show up as, oh, I have to talk to this person. I don't want to talk to this person. It could show up as flakiness, forgetting, being late. So the coach I work with right now, I probably do like 7 calls right now. I'm in like 5 to 7 calls with him per week, sometimes more. I am hardly ever late for him for the first time in my life. That's not totally true. When I worked with, it seems like every time I work with a coach, I'm really, really punctual because it's something, it's an investment, but more importantly, it feels in alignment to work with a coach who I know is helping me propel my life in the right direction. So those are just some examples. What else is a sign of a lack of an alignment? Just a sense of anxiety, like just general anxiety. If you're somebody that's always anxious, aside from a medical condition, right? Sometimes anxiety comes from gut issues, although physical symptoms can be a sign of that you're not in alignment. Disease can be a sign that you have not been in alignment and listening to your soul's calling for a long, long time. Okay? Don't take my word for it. Do the research yourself. Learn about the body-mind connection, how symptoms show up. Physical pain can show up as some kind of imbalance with your soul purpose, with your inner alignment, with your higher self. Go look it up. Start doing the research. If you're more of a left brain analytical person like my husband, you probably aren't listening to this podcast anyway. However, if you're curious, just start reading up on it. About the body-mind connection and the connection between why we're in pain and being out of alignment. Or, when we're not speaking our truth, that's lack of alignment. If we're somebody that holds back on speaking truthfully, that's out of alignment. So, circling back to the perfectionism piece, I do think perfectionism, in my observation and what I've researched and read and observed in my clients and in myself and in so many entrepreneurs, is a symptom of fear or lack of inner alignment. And like I said earlier, there's the perfectionism that I have, which is lack of action. So you can say later, well, I didn't have enough time to do it. Or there's the person that's always perfecting, right? The overdoer. And nothing ever, ever, ever is going to be good enough. Which leads me to the issue of self-worth. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, chances are you know that self-worth is kind of my jam. People who come to me, sometimes they're not even aware. They often come to work with me because they want to grow their business. They want financial prosperity. But what they don't always realize is the reason why they don't have this in their life. They don't have the thriving business, or maybe their business is good, like they have a good, solid 6-figure business, but it's plateaued. It's not exciting them anymore. They're comfortable. Or they would like to go into mid to high 6 figures or 7 figures, 8 figures. And it's just not happening. Maybe they make $5,000, $10,000 more dollars every year, but it's nothing really exciting, or it isn't enough to write home about. Now, for some people, this might be great, but for the high achievers, for the perfectionists, right? If you're like most successful entrepreneurs or successful entrepreneurs to be, you want more, right? You want to create, you want to make an impact. You want people's lives to change. You want to create things that are going to help people so that they can live better. You're solving problems, right? I had this guy come over to my house a couple of weeks ago. His name is Pesky Pete. He removed poison ivy from people's yards by pulling it out by hand. Because a lot of people don't want to use the chemicals in their yard. They have wildlife, they have dogs, they have animals. It's not good for the bees, right? Or they're trying to be mindful of the planet. And what people are finding out is spraying those chemicals are not very effective. Weed whacking them just means it's going to come back. So this guy comes over and he spends hours in your yard or wherever on your property pulling out these poison ivy vines, or however it grows, to its root. And he came over, he did a demonstration, and it was like the root was like 3 feet long. And he does that for every single plant. And he guarantees his services for a year. He'll come back for the initial visit, and then he'll come back for 3 subsequent visits. And it's like, oh my God, it's such a simple concept. He's a professional puller of poison ivy. So when he came to visit and did the quote, he said, I'm booked out for a year. So a year from now, so I think he came in September 2020. So he wasn't available till September 2021. That's how in demand he is. So are you starting to see where I'm going with this? And that's what really struck me before I go there. That's what really struck me, is that he's providing a service that is helping people. It's making their lives better. His clients have been able to sit out in the summertime in their yard and enjoy their yard and not worry about poison ivy. They don't worry about their kids getting poison ivy because it's growing everywhere. And you better believe that we are going to have Pesky Pete come to our property next year in 2021 and remove our poison ivy, because we see the value in a service and we know it's going to help our lives. It's going to help us enjoy our property. So my point here that I'm trying to drive home, I've talked about a lot of things, but it really comes down to this one single concept. If you are somebody that is getting in their way with your perfectionism because you're not good enough and you don't have high self-worth and you're constantly spinning your wheels, you're constantly lacking clarity, you're constantly in a state of overwhelm and fighting this inner battle because you're not in alignment with yourself, you don't really have a business. Now, you might have a business on paper. It might be paying the bills. It might not be paying the bills. Many business owners are struggling. But warriors, I invite you to really, really take the time. Many people have time right now. They have time on their hands to figure out what alignment looks like for you, to do the inner work so that you can work through the perfectionism and the I'm not good enough, and the inner struggle and the lack of connection to your higher self. So many people have back pain, and I feel that with myself, talking about the body again. So many people have back pain, or they're crooked, right? What do you think that symbolizes? Any clue? Like people who are always struggling, like when I had my acupuncture practice, I had so many people with pain in their trapezius muscles, right? The constant stress, the constant headaches, because the pain radiated from their shoulders. We're talking gallbladder channel, bladder channel, into the back of their neck and radiated to the side of their head into their temples. And many people had a migraine. So when you constantly are in a state of physical pain, especially that involves the spine being out of alignment, then this is the main reason why I stopped practicing and stopped having a clinical practice, is because I felt limited. These people would just come back over and over again complaining about the same things, but they weren't able to really address the inner workings of why they were having that pain, because they weren't willing to do the inner work. And that's not to discount acupuncture, because acupuncture helps so many people with so much. Acupuncture moves chi, it moves energy. So in that regard, yes, like sometimes there were patients that would come in and they just needed their chi to be moved because they had been sitting in a chair all day for, a month straight, or they did a lot of driving for their job, or they're just stressed, and sometimes that boost is just what they needed. But these chronic patients, right, that didn't want to come to terms with their perfectionism or come to terms with their lack of self-worth, because either due to lack of awareness or due to not wanting to change, they would just continue to come back over and over and over again with the same conditions, because the body is always going to reflect your lack of alignment, your lack of connection to your higher self, your lack of self-love, the fact that you are with the same partner who is not a good match for you, or you're with that partner who you are codependent with, or that partner who you are not speaking your mind and your honest truth to. Those things are all going to manifest in your body somehow. And those things are all going to show up as you represented in your business, as you represented in your money story, as you reflected in your bank account. So what are the numbers in your bank account? What is your supply? Is it money? Is it the amount you're receiving from your paycheck every week or every 2 weeks or every month? Or how many clients you're bringing in? How you're getting paid by them? What shows up in your bank account is a reflection of who you are. I'm going to say this again. What shows up in your bank account is a direct reflection of who you are being. So if you are out of alignment and you are doing something just to go through the motions in your job or your business because it pays the bills, because it's comfortable, because you don't want to change, because it's scary, you're fearful, you're imperfection, you have low self-worth, you don't think you deserve. Where I was going with this is, if you have all these things that I just mentioned, you're never going to have the business that you want. Your bank account is going to reflect who you are being on the inside. I had a realization earlier today, and I'm still learning the lessons, okay? 2020 has been basically a year of implementation. I'm in several business courses. I feel like I'm getting my MBA, or I'm back at school. I'm doing a lot of work for these courses. So I've been focusing on that primarily, getting my systems in order and everything. And I caught myself today looking at my bank account. And I was like, oh, okay. I better do this, and this in order to have this. I immediately went into okay, this is what's in my bank account. This is what it means. And if I go at this rate and, if I have so many clients and so many launches, I'll have this. And I was just immediately going into like that doing again and that, what if that doesn't happen? And I was like, wait. Money is not my supply. What is in my bank account? That's just a bunch of numbers. What shows up in my bank account is the result of who I am being on the inside. And I immediately turned that around. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness for this inner work. Warriors, you're here for a reason. And I know that you're very smart people because you want to change your life. You have a business that you know has potential to go to next level. You have an amazing life, but you know that you can go next level. And here you are, minute 42 of this podcast, and you're continuing to listen. And the fact that you're still here tells me that you want to know more, that you want to learn more, that you want to grow and evolve. You know the importance of who you are on the inside and how that reflects in your outside world. And you know the reason that your bank account is the way it is and is a direct result of who you are being. I knew you were smart. I knew I loved you guys. I mean, seriously, you're the best, warriors. I don't know how I got so lucky to have an amazing audience. So, before I wrap this up, because I don't like to really talk this long, but the divine was coming through me tonight, I would love for you to consider a few takeaways, okay? So first of all, perfectionism. Really understand what it is and how it shows up. And I think for most people, perfectionism shows up. If you grew up in a civilized culture where there are expectations placed upon you, chances are you have some level of perfectionism. So I would love for you to journal how perfectionism shows up for you. And if you're not a perfectionist, great, like that's awesome. And if you've done the work and you no longer have that in your identity, even better. And that's actually an invitation. That's step number 2, is if you do have any of these identities that I talked about, perfectionism, lack of self-worth, feeling like you're not deserving, which is a subset of not having self-worth, not being in alignment with your higher self. What would it look like if you were the opposite of that? What are some words that you can use to change your identity so that you are a happy, thriving person who makes a lot of money and can make an impact and help change the world because people are going to start growing and evolving as a result of working with you? And finally, number 3, what is that one thing that you can do every single day? What is that one thing, maybe it's a one word, right? People talk about their one word for the year. Is it having that one word plastered all over your house on a Post-it note, or having mantras posted all over your house on Post-it notes? Or is it meditation, or is it finding a good hypnotherapist or a good coach to help you? What is that one thing that you need to implement right now? Like, you're going to get off of this podcast and you're going to go make that phone call. You're going to go do some research, assuming that you're not driving or sleeping or doing, obviously not able to do it at that time. What is that one thing? And I want to hear what that one thing is. I actually really want to know, warriors, what your takeaways are from this episode. Because in my interpretation, this is the most important episode I've recorded to date. Because this is where all the juice is. This is where for those of you that really want to just suck the marrow out of life, right? Who is that? Dead Poets Society, Henry David Thoreau, I believe. Sorry if it's not Henry David, but live deeply and suck the marrow out of life. Again, apologies if I misquoted. So what is that one thing that you can do immediately? I want you to let me know. I want you to tag me on Instagram or message me on Instagram at I am Angela Noel and let me know what that one thing is that you're going to implement ASAP, because you know it's going to make a change in your life. So warriors, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, I am so incredibly grateful. And I know I say this every week, but I really don't take you guys for granted. I just talked to my mom the other day, and she told me about the various family members who are listening to the podcast and her friends who are listening to the podcast. And I'm just so grateful that I have you as listeners. I mean, I consider myself to be the luckiest girl in the world. Be well. Don't watch the news, especially if it's causing physical and mental stress. And really I invite you to be your most aligned self and find out how you can get to that pathway to freedom so you can be the empowered warrior that you always knew you were. And until next time, bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Empowered Warrior podcast. It is an honor and a privilege to have you as a listener. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast and would like to help others pave their pathway to freedom, end their disempowerment and suffering, and become an empowered warrior, please share this podcast with your friends and family. Also, it is my intention to help humanity grow and evolve to their highest potential. So if you really enjoy what you're hearing, please help me spread the word by leaving a review in iTunes. Thank you again, and I am so grateful to be able to serve you in this very exciting way.